Yo, what's up, guys? It's your boy No Name. Last Epoch 1.0 is coming like right around the corner. Pretty sure you've heard, especially if you're watching this video. If you enjoy what I'm about to give you guys a quick primer on how to play the game and whatnot, feel free to, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Yeah, whatever. Anyways, into what I wanted to talk about. Just giving you guys a primer, like really just some baseline information to kind of soothe your way into the game. I've got some friends who've been asking me questions about it because they want to get into it with 1.0. The release is exciting. Everybody's going to be playing. They want to try it out. Just, realizing that there's some advice I can give to PoE players in terms of ways that the game can be punishing and also is notably less punishing than playing PoE was. So let's start all the way from the beginning, right? Your campaign gameplay. It's honestly very straightforward. The questing is not too complicated at all. You follow the yellow markers for main story quest lines and blue markers for side quests. Some things about this, by the way, main story quests and side quests sometimes will either give you one of either passive points or idle slots, or even both in a couple cases. And this is worth noting. However, you do not need to actually do all of these, and it's not going to be relevant for you immediately. But I do recommend when you're playing and you finish the campaign, take a moment to check the bottom left of the map interface. It'll say passive point rewards and idle slot rewards. And it should be, you want that to be 15 out of 15 and 8 out of 8. And I'm saying out of 15 and out of 8 because that's actually the cap on the amount of rewards that you're able to be given from quests. Whether there's plenty of quests, I actually do not know the number off the top of my head, the number of quests that give each type of reward, but you only need to complete 15 total quests that will give you passives and 8 total quests that will give you idols in order to get full completion of everything relevant from the campaign. Additionally, there is +1 all attributes from killing Majasa at the end. Now, on that note, though, I talked about like the passive stuff and whatnot. So, especially if you're coming from PoE, and let's say maybe you're into speed running, or maybe you were just interested in doing faster campaign runs in PoE, something that's really cool in Last Epoch that is worth noting is if you look into it some, there's a lot of information out there about routing that allows you to get to the end game quicker, the monolith system, because the monoliths actually unlock from the moment that you select your mastery. We'll talk about masteries later on the line a little bit more detail. But the moment you pick your mastery is when you can enter monoliths. And so now you will be like level 14 to level 21 at that time period. And you might be a little too weak on character, whether that be because of gear or because of skill points or whatever it may be. And you will get rolled by monoliths because monoliths are always going to have an area level that starts at 58 for your first one. But if you're feeling it or you've seen people do it, you think you've got enough to try, you could go in and try it out, right? But this opens up routing possibility because since you get it so early in the game, all you're really running the campaign for at that point is the passives and the idols. And I don't recommend this to extremely new players, right? Or if you're not feeling confident, do not feel like you have to do this. The speed difference is honestly not that big, not in terms of campaign time. You're going to lose a lot more time being unprepared for those first two monoliths. Really, the first monolith, even, because if you can complete the first, you should be able to get yourself to a position where you can complete the second. But if you can't complete the first, then you're going to be just losing time to trying out something, just bashing your head into a wall because it's fun. I mean, look, we've been there. We've all been there where your character's in like T9s, T10s, then you get your first 11, you fall and it goes to a 12, and you're like, what's the worst that could happen? And boom, you die. So we've all been there. But it was just like a cool thing that I think like is neat to think about. If you like get into the game and really dig in, you can get to some really cool optimized route running that has you like, fully ready to go in monoliths like within an hour and a half, 2 hours of gameplay. And that's actually really cool stuff. Now, on to monoliths, right? Because that's the thing that I brought up as a thing that you're able to skip your way into. Monoliths are our end game system. I want you to think of it as best as you can as an equivalent to mapping from PoE. Think more specifically if you've played during the Conquerors of the Atlas era / Echoes of the Atlas, so between 3.9 and 3.16, that time period, the region to Atlas, the monolith system is very reminiscent of that, but without a lot of the downsides, including, and most importantly, not having the terrible progression curve that it had. Not terrible in terms of like terrible doing it. Once you learned how to do it, it was fairly responsive and easy to do and very rewarding. But If you played in that era, you know exactly what I'm talking about when I say it took a lot of time to figure out how to not accidentally brick yourself trying to progress that atlas. You don't have that problem here. All you have to do is run echoes, run them out as far as you can, build up stability, do the quest line echoes, kill the end boss of that monolith. Then when you kill that end boss, you're gonna get a reward. It's called a blessing, which is a character buff that you carry with you. Each monolith can give you one blessing. There's a variety of blessings that it'll roll from, and you'll be able to look up on various sites to see where those blessings that you want come from. Now, once you've done that, you go to the next monolith and onto the next monolith. And the goal is to reach what we call empowered monoliths. Empowered monoliths are set everything to base zone level 100, and then it raises the corruption level to 100. At a bare minimum, corruption is just a modifier that makes the zones harder. Don't think about it too hard. So you get all that, and of course, while you're running, you're going to be dropping gear, and you'll see that the nodes have specific rewards. I'm not going to get into all that in the nitty gritty, right? I'm mostly just here, like I said, it's a primer. I'm mostly just here to let you know that the mapping in this game is fairly simple. You just enter next zone and go. One tip I will give you for running these echoes, by the way, not maps. I gotta start using the right terms. You know, crossing over games is hard. You're gonna call them maps a lot too. But in those echoes, boss rushing tends to be the way to go. Not specifically just pure single target, no mob kill. Like think like boss rushing in PoE. Boss rushing strats in early league PoE, not when you're playing optimized like Frostwing of Wintry Blast characters, for example. When you're playing a character who's designed to just go quickly through the map and kill a couple mobs here, there, you know, slap in a mesa, run up to Oak, run him down, do your 2 loops around the map, get your stuff and get out type deal. That's a lot what Echo gameplay feels like at the top end in Last Epoch. And then there's also arena nodes that are your standard kill thing nodes. And so that's just a quick recommendation for running those. So you'll be doing a lot of objective hunting. Then while you're doing all that, of course, you're getting gear and all sorts of other stuff. We're going to talk about gear a little bit further down the line, but it's all relative to your character anyways, which is our next big thing. How does your character function? I've got a couple big notes for you, especially, again, transitioning from PoE, right? The number one thing that I want to highlight is that there is a skill specialization system, right? We have class-based skills like most RPGs do, as opposed to PoE's skill gem system. But in order to enable that level of customization and optimization for our skill gems that say our supports do in PoE, instead we get skill specializations. And it's a wide variety of nodes. I really do mean a wide variety of nodes. I think it's about I think 30 something nodes per tree usually, and a lot of different options, different ways to scale the skill, ways to turn skills into utility skills, ways to make them higher uptime, higher efficacy. It's that there's a lot, and you know if you're following a build, the build that you're following will recommend to you what to take, and it's worth noting you don't even have to follow a build. This game is very easy to get into, and you really can just take what you see at face value if you wanted to just finally ram your head into something fresh without thinking about it too hard. One thing here with skill specializations is that when you spec into a skill and you level it through gameplay, if you decide that you spec this point incorrectly and you want to respec that point, you will have to re-level the skill to get that point back. There's a minimum level threshold based on your character level, but oftentimes your skills are going to be beyond that. But they do also have an accelerated XP gain point to keep your skills from falling too far behind the relative position of your character. Now, that's one part of like what really makes your character. The next thing that really makes your character is the passes and your mastery choice, right? So, like I mentioned earlier, you get to pick your mastery pretty early on, and generally, if you come in, you've got an idea of what mastery you want to play. Be it the Rune Master. I'll be personally playing the new Warlock Mastery class. I'm so excited for that to come out, by the way. Maybe you saw the Falconer and that was your thing. Maybe you love Necromancy, whatever it may be, you've picked your mastery. Now, when you're on the passive tree, you'll see it's not just your base class's passive tree, you know, the Acolyte tree, the Rogue tree, what may have you. But now you've also got your mastery tree, the Lich tree, the Falconer tree, the Sentinel tree, not the Sentinel tree, that's a base class, the Void Knight tree, my bad, right? Whatever it may be, you've seen that tree now, and you can then add in more points to there, and those tend to be the more powerful effects. and you get access to everything in there. You just have to, unlock them by investing more points down the tree. Additionally, you can take from the first half of the other masteries. This is a bit of a high-end optimization thing that's only really necessary once you reach about 250 or more corruption, if and only if you've been able to determine that there's a high value node in a different mastery that would do more for you than something that you already had access to in your main mastery. Additionally, respecking passives in this game is not like PoE. You don't need a special currency. There's no orbs of regret here. We have gold. PoE2 moment, right? But like we have gold here. It's a fully integrated currency within the game, and it has all of its uses. One of its easiest uses, especially early on, is to just use it to unspec skill points and then respec them. And you do not have to re-level if you decide to unspec your character skill points. It's only or character passive points rather. You gotta not use conflated terminology. Skill specialization points have to be re-leveled, but your character passive points, those are fine. The next part of your character, and arguably the biggest departure from PoE, honestly, in terms of things that people get really hyped about when they think about Last Epoch, is the gearing system, particularly the crafting associated with it. Items in Last Epoch have 4 affixes as opposed to 6, and all sorts of other things related to that. But the biggest things to talk about in gear, I'm going to give you some quick notes about how gearing works, and then some tips that I recommend related to gearing before, get ready to wind this down. 1, gearing has those 4 affixes, multiple slots. Slots have their preferences, all that good stuff, right? When you're crafting, you can only ever craft up to tier 5 of a modifier. And how you get to tier 5, how you get to those tiers, is by literally slamming the affix of choice on. See, I'll probably put up something on the screen if I remember when I'm editing this to show me like crafting a gear piece. And it's just, I dropped affix shards from mapping, or I shattered random pieces that had things that a lot of what I wanted, or I used a rune of removal. These are 2 very important currencies, by the way. Rune of shattering, rune of removal. You use these to target acquire the affix shards that you want, especially those rarer ones. Like if you're hunting down, say, your main skill, if you're like me in the video, I'm playing Wandering Spirits, I'm looking for level to Wandering Spirits and the spell damage mod on the chest piece. Maybe I pop a rune of removal on a chest that I see that has it, so I can pull down all of those tiers. And the difference between the shattering and a removal, by the way, is that shattering pulls a random amount of shards based on tiers from all of the mods on the items. You could just completely whiff on the one you want, or only get one of like a full T6. Who knows, right? But a removal is like an annul. And when you annul that piece, that mod rather, from the piece, you will end up getting all shards equivalent to the mod level. So T4 mod, you get 4 shards, and that's very useful again for those rarer or higher priority affixes. So keep that in mind. And then you can just slam them onto another piece that it's compatible with. And that's how you craft your pieces up. There's a lot more that I could go into it. If you want more detail about that, let me know in the comments, right? And maybe I'll make a quick video or something to talk about it, or stop by the Discord or stream, wherever, ask questions. I'm more than happy to help. I just don't want to like bloat this video with too much knowledge, because it's mostly meant to just give you the idea that the game is approachable. It's not that bad. You really can get by in this game, especially in the crafting system, by just experimenting. A lot of the time, you are going to have so many more shards and so many more runes and glyphs than you need to understand how to use these things effectively. I'm just here to tell you, like, it's going to be fine. You'll be fine, right? Additionally, in gearing, there's a slot called idols, and those are drop only. They can't be crafted. Think like relics from the sanctum, especially if you think more like the sanctified relics that existed back in 3.20, or from this current league, actually the charms. When you drop them, they're pre-rolled. Tinctures pre-rolled, things like that. That's what idols are. They carry a variety of stats. The smaller ones are most known for their defensive stats. You use a lot of 1x1 and 2x1 idols in order to fix your defensive stats, whether that be resistances, health, and whatnot. And there's some damage mods on there, especially for ailment builds. A lot of the small ones have bleed, poison, it's at all the ailment on hit chance that you might want for your build. Then as you get into the 3x1s and the 1x3s is when you start to really dig into the class specific modifiers, stuff like chance to trigger skills based on other specific skills that you used, or applying a special ailment based on. So, for example, acolytes all have access to damned. It's a necrotic damage debuff, and the idol for it is only specific to them as opposed to as a global idol item. You get what I mean? That's more the idea of what the idols are for. And then the 4x1s are another tier of really powerful effects. 3x1s and 4x1s also include things like pen for specific skills, scaling per mage, that's up. There's a lot of them. Scaling per spark charge. I'm not even going to explain what those are. Just know that if you have a class mechanic you want to scale around, there's a good chance that idols exist to make that scaling possible. A good chance, not guaranteed, right? I'll drop a link in the description actually to a resource where you can see what's all available as you get deeper into your character building. Or if you're following a build, they probably already told you, hey, these idols are going to be really good for you. Some quick things about gear and some just general tips before we, to, wind us down, get us out of here, get you guys ready to, get into the game, right? Because less watching me yap and listening to me rather, and more game time, baby. So, one, when you're playing, resistances in this game are not as critical as they are in PoE. I went through the vast majority of this Monolith speedrun that I was doing, just practicing the character and whatnot, uncapped on multiple resistances, right? It's not like PoE where you get to maps and the first thing you check is, am I 75 all res? That's not critical. It will help you. It will make life easier, but a lot more damage in this game is meant to be dodged or can be mitigated through simply actually having more life or other sources of mitigation. The stat armor in this game is a full hit damage reduction as opposed to only physical in this game. And so you can use that to shore up weaker defenses. You can use ward to shore up lower life pools, etc., without worrying about the fact that you don't have perfectly capped resistances. Once you get to empowered monoliths and you start stacking corruption, as they start like when you're stacking corruption, not even necessary at base empowered monoliths, but like, if you're like 120, 150, or you just notice you're dying to something in particular, you can get more resistances then. Get yourself to cap. That's one. And two, very related to that actually, is that there's a death recap in this game. It's not as extensive as say like a wild death recap or anything, but you'll be able to see the damage type of the final blow that hit you, which should give you a pretty good idea of where your defenses might be weak, or the fact that hit might just be absolutely massive, quite frankly. It'll be like, you died to insert attack here from insert monster here, damage type or types if it was, physical and void, for example. I totally am not just referencing a very infuriating set of Orbis deaths that I had, right? You will have that information so you can then think, ooh, do I need to cap those? Do I need to get those resistances up before I keep going? Again, decision to be made in that moment, but it's not a big thing to panic over. Two, be liberal with the crafting system. I promise you, it's not that punishing. You might lose some rare shards in the process of figuring things out, especially as you see what all the various glyphs and whatnot do. But be liberal with it. Just give it a whirl, try stuff out. Things work as it's shown on the tin, and that's very convenient for you as a player. Three, and related to that actually, is a glyph that I want to highlight because I don't see enough people highlighting it. There is the glyph of chaos. And what it does is when you're upgrading a modifier, let's say I'm working on my weapon and one of my prefixes actually isn't right. It dropped with one really good prefix and one mediocre prefix. I might glyph of chaos that mediocre prefix. So it's upgrading it from say T2 to T3, but it's also going to change what that modifier is. And you can use that to try to cheat your way into some really nice gear earlier on. And so that's just like another nice thing to be aware of. Lastly, as it pertains to gear and crafting and all of that, right? Flat damage is nuts in this game. A lot of places, as you see it in the passive tree, in your skill specializations, on your weapons especially, flat damage rules. There is an insane amount of percent damage and more multipliers around in the game and penetration and stuff like that of high priority. But when you see flat damage, especially before you're level 70, it's almost always going to be your best stat. Like that's going to be a big thing for you, especially so, you're playing a melee build, you're playing swipe, and you get a weapon It's got better flat on its base. It's probably better than your current weapon, especially if it has a flat damage roll attached to it, right? And a related note to flat damage. Damage types in this game, there's a thing like adaptive damage. If you've played like League, you're probably familiar with adaptive force, the stat that they use to give you either AD or AP, depending, so that they didn't have to make an obnoxious amount of code and make it look more confusing. A very similar system is used in Last Epoch, where if I have an item that says plus 56 spell damage, it's not 56 spell damage with no damage type. It's going to be plus 56 spell damage to the skills that it affects of its highest damage type. So that skill is necrotic. It's a necrotic spell. That skill is going to get 56 flat necrotic spell damage added to it. Oh, it's a fire skill. It's going to add 56 flat fire. And now some of the sources of flat damage are going to specify flat void, flat ice, whatever it may be. But if it doesn't specify, then it will just adapt to what you need. So you don't have to worry about the stuff like in PoE where you're looking for flat lightning to spells on your wand and instead you get flat cold to spells. It's just flat. And of note, it will always specify whether or not it is melee or spell. On that note, if you are playing a bow character or a throwing character, so throwing skills, especially if you're a rogue, and you'll see things like Shuriken, that skill with throwing damage modifiers. Melee and spell damage modifiers are not throwing damage modifiers unless the skill that you were scaling specifically says that it can also scale with this. And this brings me to my last tip. Tooltips in Last Epoch are reliable for the most part. There's a couple little things like it can't calculate for necrotic resistance shred, for example. It won't know that you have a bunch of fizz pen for your fizz skill, right? Like it can't tell you all of that. And it's not the greatest for calculating ailment damage, but that has a section in the character sheet that you can hover over to get a rough idea of if it's looking good or not. But when we're talking about the tooltips, if you hover a skill and you press Alt, it will show you a lot of information, give you some additional details about like trigger rates and all that other good stuff that you might want to know about. Most importantly, it will give you a list of every scaling tag applicable for the skill. So Wandering Spirits, for example, has the notable tags for me when I was scaling the character were spell, damage over time, necrotic. All three of those tags are on my skill, right? You can hold Alt there and you will see all of those tags. And that means that those stats will always work for this skill. And that's very important to know. You can also see in there what main stat it scales with there. The main stats, strength, dex, and vitality, attunement. Press Alt, you'll see that some skills scale with int, some scale with attunement, etc. Right? Trust your tooltips. They will be your friend for, again, the most part. There's a couple little things here, there, but the tooltip is very much a friend, and it does try to account for things such as penetration in its math anyways. And lastly, your filter. It's a gear-based ARPG. Of course it's got filters. This isn't Diablo 4. What type of nonsense? So, going from PoE, you have your very extensive filter that you likely just copied the never sync strict of and called it a day, right? I recommend getting a little bit more comfy with filters for this game. There's a lot of tools that can help you and some things that will help you understand, and it's very copyable and all of that. But the number one thing to note is that unlike in PoE, people's filters in Last Epoch are very specialized, like across the board. Your filter usually is a direct reflection of the build that you're playing. Getting down to the base types, it's a lot of the same features as it is in PoE. Like the wizard actually looks, the in-game filter editing wizard looks a good bit like it does in Filterblade, honestly. It's just easier to manage because it's literally in-game and not a website and all that good stuff. It's actually really cool. I strongly recommend like getting comfy with it. You can get all sorts of levels of detail with it. And being able to modify your filter on the fly is a hell of a plus, guys. I'm just saying. Sometimes you go, I really do not need to see another one of these items. Or you're like, man, I feel like I haven't seen insert thing here. Highlight that a little bit more aggressively in the filter just in case. You know what I mean? And you're going to find that like good filter usage is going to make the end game more playable. You don't really need a leveling filter in this game. It'll help if you really cared, but like, you can kind of get by without it until monos. Once you get to Monolith, you're going to want a basic filter for your like build slash class, and you can find good filters in a couple places. For like the most baseline example, I'm pretty sure Heavy still updates their filters per patch, and that's what I use to get started with the game. Following that, though, any build guide, any good build guide, really, like especially like fully like in-depth ones, will feature complementary filters that are meant to be used for that character, and so you can grab them from the creator that put them there, or if you're say on max roll, they have them there as well wherever you go to get your builds. Or my personal favorite option at the moment is that Last Epoch Tools. Again, link will be in the description because I mentioned it earlier as well, but Last Epoch Tools has a filter building wizard, which like it's kind of doubles as like a filter blade thing. But like imagine if filter blade, instead of making you go through and configure each rule you wanted to change, just said like, yeah, roughly what do you want to do, right? So it'll ask you, hey, what type of damage types are you using? What type of skill are you using? What type of stats do you care about? And then it goes through and does all that work for you. And it's not perfect. There's still going to be things you're going to want to modify long term, but it gets you an incredible starting place that, like, honestly, for your intents and purposes, you could use for quite a while before realizing, man, I got to change something. So I just wanted to put that out there as a great idea for like getting your filter made, because filtering, as we all know, ARPGs get to that point where you just need a filter, otherwise your eyes hurt and you can't click right, and it just looks cooked. Anyways, this was a bit long for a primer. There's a lot of information, and I don't know if you're thinking primer, but it's 20 something minutes. I mean, look, I know, but trust and believe it could get much deeper. If you want to know more, again, feel free to ask. If I see enough questions of a specific type, I might make a quick video just to like show some other things related to that topic, or come by the Discord, come by stream. I'll be streaming on launch day, and then on my schedule's a little flippant, so you'll have to just kind of see, because it's my work stuff is still shifting around at the moment. But if you want to come see me live and ask questions there, you can. If you want to come to the Discord, ask questions there, drop a comment, ask a question, I'll respond, whatever it may be. Thank you guys for watching. If you interact with the video, I love you, and I guarantee you that you'll drop the one unique you need when you hit the empowered monolith, if you in fact like this fucking video. Anyways, thank you guys for watching and listening. Take care. I'll see you guys there in a terra.